What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith as we break down the latest news and notes in the NFL. Week 10 in the books. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? I mean, it's crazy week in the NFL, man. There's a lot to get to, and I will say this: if anybody tells you that they know what's going to happen in the NFL on a week-to-week basis, they're either faking it or straight up lying to you.
It's either way. They're lying through their teeth because no one knows what the heck's going to happen. And that's the first topic, are the discouraging losses with some teams that were really starting to make a case for themselves. And this is going to morph itself into a bunch of different ways. But when you think about it, Buffalo goes down to South Beach. They lose to Miami. That was a really, really tough loss, 30-13. Just really, really bad. You had the Carolina Panthers. They lose outright to the New Orleans Saints. You had the Jacksonville Jaguars blow a huge lead and lose to Davis Mills and the Houston Texans. The Pittsburgh Steelers go out to SoFi and play the Chargers on Sunday night, and their primetime woes continue as they lose 25-10. And the New York Giants, which we'll continue that conversation in a second with our next topic, continue to blow massive leads under Brian Daboll's leadership. But, Coach, out of all those, which was the most discouraging?
That's a good question. You've got some great contenders. There's a lot of fan bases that woke up Monday morning and
Yes.
Exactly, right. They thought about sticking their head in the oven there. But I mean, Buffalo is discouraging because they've had a stranglehold on the AFC East for the last 6-7 years. Uh-oh, I just said 6-7, Jeff. But somewhere out there, somebody is doing this stupid stuff. Sorry, listeners, but they've had a stranglehold on that division for a while now, and they have nothing to show for it. Nothing, not even a Super Bowl appearance. And now it feels like everyone else is catching up. New England may have surpassed them already. Buffalo's got a lot of problems on defense. Miami ran the ball right down their throat. And so that it's almost like, oh my gosh, is the window closing? Now, Josh Allen's still a young quarterback. I mean, Buffalo could still kind of rebuild this thing around Josh Allen. But I think if you're a Bills fan, that loss was really discouraging because, I mean, Miami just put it on them. And this is a Miami team that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago as, the season's over and McDaniel's going to get fired, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all those fan bases should rightfully feel discouraged this morning. But in the long history of the misery of the Buffalo Bills fan, this is just another chapter.
I want to give a shout out to Wesley Coleman. He's my co-host on the For Your Viewing Pleasure podcast, where we preview the upcoming slate of games. When we talked about this game in Miami, he said this has trap game written all over it. The Bills are coming off of a huge home win over the Chiefs, and then they're going to go down to the Miami Dolphins and they're going to lose. And I said I could see it happening, but damn, was he right. Now you look at the AFC East standings. New England at 8-2 after beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Florida. Buffalo is 6-3. And it's just, man, it feels like, again, can they get out of their own way? Can they find a way to kind of find something that's like their calling card? Because what you saw is the Dolphins got out to a lead, and then the Bills, what's their bread and butter? It's running the football, and they can't run the football. They got to throw it. Josh Allen was turning it over. Let's look at what they have coming up. The Bills, they host the Buccaneers next week. Then they go to the Houston Texans. They go to Pittsburgh. They host the Bengals. Then they have the Patriots, Browns, Eagles, and Jets. So let me ask you this question now. Do you still see two teams making the postseason from the AFC East?
I think Buffalo will still get in. Okay. Because you're only going to get one out of the AFC North.
Yes.
And you're probably only going to get one out of the AFC South. I don't believe in the Jaguars. I think that the Colts win that division and that's it. So just by default, you'll probably get two teams from the East. It feels like Buffalo, hey, they're very talented. Josh Allen is always going to keep them in the mix. They could turn this around. They beat the Chiefs. They lose to the Dolphins. It's just, that's the way the league is right now, man. You just don't know on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, the Steelers beat the Colts in week 9, the team that everyone was thinking is the hottest team in the NFL. And then they go to LA and they completely lay an egg. Let's talk about the Steelers loss, Coach. How deflating was that for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah. Hey, look, there's no shame in losing to the Chargers all the way out in LA, but it's the way that it went down. I mean, Pittsburgh was just lifeless on offense. They made curious decisions with their scheme. Aaron Rodgers played his worst game of the season as a Steeler. And if you're a Steelers fan and you look at some of the things that have been question marks about that team, like their inability, unwillingness, whatever you want to call it, to land a viable second wide receiver to play opposite DK Metcalf. Well, that comes and bites them in the ass in that game Sunday night, right? Another trade deadline comes and goes. This is 2 years in a row now. The conversation has been, are they good enough at wide receiver? And the answer is no. And then what did the Chargers do last night? They doubled up DK Metcalf and they dared anybody else on the Steelers to beat them. And Pittsburgh had no answer. And that is not a solvable problem going forward. Like, that's not like suddenly one of those secondary receivers is going to turn into a dude. That's not going to happen. And so if you're a Steelers fan, you're like, oh, here we are again, man. We can see our ceiling, and our ceiling is not high enough to be in the conversation with the best teams in the AFC.
Yeah, some Steeler fans are thinking, oh, Marcus Valdez-Scantling's on the practice squad. Like, do you really think that's the answer? I mean, it might be a help, but it's not the answer. The answer was potentially getting a proven commodity at the trade deadline. The Steelers didn't do that. I just think that the Pittsburgh Steelers, up until this game, I never felt personally like that was a necessity, a wide receiver too. And I've heard you talk about it on multiple podcasts, write about it at steelcurtainnetwork.com, how that they don't have that other threat, but they were still moving the football. They were doing it in unique ways. The jumbo package, using a lot of tight ends, getting people like Darnell Washington involved in different ways. This was the first game that I saw it look glaring. Man, do they need someone else? They just can't have just DK Metcalf. But let's go back and revisit some of these other losses, though. I thought the Carolina, if you're a Panthers fan, your oldest son is a Panthers fan.
Yep.
If you're a Panthers fan, you're feeling good about yourself. Rico Dowdle's doing some good things. They seem to have found something there. And then you lose to the Saints at home 17-7. What were your thoughts on that one?
That's a huge missed opportunity for Carolina.
Yeah.
That's a young team that hasn't experienced a lot of success. Maybe getting caught up in the little bit of success that they've had this year, maybe overlooking a bad Saints team that is still, though, a division rival. And we know how those division games go, man. They're coin tosses. It's a growing up experience for Dave Canales, for his entire staff, for his football team. If you're a Panthers fan, you hate to see it, because 6-4, which they could have been with a victory, and you're firmly in the conversation. 5-5. Now you're on the outside looking in with ground to make up. So yeah, growing pains there in Carolina.
Oh, it's weird. So let's move on from those topics and those games, and let's talk about a team that we had in that first topic, but it's going to lead us into the second. And that's the New York Giants. The New York Giants with Jackson Dart. He started this game, didn't finish. Another potential head injury that's going to be diagnosed here shortly, I'm sure. They lose, and they have lost in some stunning ways. It was more stunning than the game they lost to the Denver Broncos, where they gave up over 30 points in the fourth quarter. But another loss. They lose to the Chicago Bears on Sunday, and that brings into question Brian Daboll's job security. It wasn't long ago you and I had a discussion on this podcast thinking Daboll's safe. He's good. He drafted Jackson Dart. They go back into the first round to get him. It seems like they have a good relationship. They're copacetic. Everything is working. Now, all of a sudden, people are questioning, is Daboll the man for the job? So you can talk about the Giants losing if you want, but my question for you is, where is Brian Daboll's job security at this stage of the season?
Yeah. Quick note about the losing. They're the first team in NFL history to blow 4 games in a single season where they had a 10-point lead or more in the fourth quarter. So,
oh my gosh,
that is damning. That is damning. How you close games matters from a coaching standpoint, because there is so much coaching strategy in those games. I'd be willing to bet, I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet if you went back and watched the fourth quarter of all of those losses, you will find all these little things that they could have done differently, like snapping the football when there's 18 seconds left on the play clock. like with a 12-point lead and 8 minutes to go, things like that. That's stuff coaches can manage. That's stuff that if you're a head coach, you're expected to manage. The Steelers under Bill Cowher had a streak, and I don't know what the exact numbers were, but it was something along the lines of they had won like 100 straight games where they had a 10-point lead or more at some point in the game. Meaning if the Steelers got up on you by 10 points, Bill Cowher knew how to manage the clock and close out that victory. Brian Daboll has certainly demonstrated he doesn't understand that. And that coupled with getting Jackson Dart hurt, for whom they have a lot of design run plays, and that's always controversial in the NFL, I think will probably bring his tenure in New York to an end.
That's going to be it. This is going to be interesting. I don't think they do this. I don't think they make a move in season. You agree with that?
I don't think so.
I don't either. And
we saw what Miami did. I think to make an in-season move, it either has to be such a train wreck that you just are like, we cannot possibly go forward, or you have to have somebody on staff that you trust to be able to steer the ship through the end of the season. I think in Miami, they didn't have the latter, and they gave McDaniel the opportunity to finish it out. I think the same will probably happen in New York, but I'd be shocked though if they're not already looking for the successor.
Which is crazy because, again, you're just talking about if he finishes out 2 of those 4 games, it's a completely different narrative. His job security is fine unless they turn it around and really look strong down the stretch. I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be done in New York. All right, let's go to our next topic, MVP update. We kind of talk about this throughout the different points of the season. The early favorite for most valuable player, I think, was probably Baker Mayfield, but that's kind of cooled down a little bit. They've lost some games, a lot of injuries, especially at the wide receiver position. Now there's 2 new players who have injected themselves into this discussion. One would be Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor, who completely went off in Berlin against the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday early morning, and Matthew Stafford, who just seems to be, I don't know, back injury. Who cares? He's playing some great football. He and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are really setting some new marks there. What do you think about those 2 players in the MVP update?
I think they're 1 and 2. You can kind of put them in whatever order you want. Taylor had 282 total yards in that game over in Germany, and he just looked like the best running back in the NFL. He runs with power. He runs with speed. His 81-yard touchdown run, it was just, he just disappeared into a pile of bodies in the middle of the line, bounced outside, and then outran defensive backs to the end zone. It's a 228-pound guy. I mentioned to you about this earlier, Jeff. He's a South Jersey guy. I got to scout him when he was in high school. He was the state 100-meter champ when he was in high school at 220 pounds.
Jeez.
To see a dude that big run that fast is really impressive. And, he is this year's Saquon Barkley. His numbers are very similar to what Barkley was putting up. He's on pace for like 1,900 some yards and 26 touchdowns. Whether or not the voters want to give an MVP to a running back, I think is really the big consideration there.
Well, what about Stafford? Because I still believe this is a quarterback award anymore. And it's not going to go to anyone else. Maybe a running back, wide receiver would be a long shot, but Matthew Stafford fits the bill. What do you think about his style of play? Is it sustainable? What are your thoughts there?
He's been awesome. He became on Sunday the first quarterback in NFL history to have 4 straight games where he had at least 3 touchdown passes and no interceptions. That's saying something. He's got 25 touchdowns and 2 interceptions for the season. And he was good when he was in Detroit for some really bad Lions teams, but when he got moved to LA and you paired him up with Sean McVay, that's like a perfect marriage of quarterback and coordinator / head coach. So, and he's going to turn 38 pretty soon. He's getting better, it feels. And you and I, we are both huge fans of the Stafford look away. The no look pass. It's brilliant stuff. And he's doing it now on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Is there a dark horse out there? Any player at any position that they might not win it, but they deserve to be recognized for how well they're playing? Is there anyone else that would fall into that category for you?
Oh yeah. And you're not going to like my answer, but if the Baltimore Ravens come back from the dead, 1-5, written off, and Lamar Jackson continues to play high-level football, and Baltimore winds up winning the AFC North, which is going to happen, Jeff.
Easy.
It's going to happen, Jeff. Then he's going to get some mention in the conversation.
Sadly, I agree with you. Now, our next topic is one that I wanted to bring up because when I saw it, I was like, I need to talk to Kevin about this. Coach, you've been an offensive coordinator. You are currently an offensive coordinator for your high school's team, but you are also a head coach. And so it gives you a very unique perspective on what's going on with the Detroit Lions from an offensive perspective. We had talked about the Lions and losing Ben Johnson and how they get a lesser known person to come in. And I don't know the gentleman's name. I'm sure you do here in a second, but Dan Campbell essentially before the Commanders game in Washington said, I'm calling the plays. And this is something Dan Campbell has done in the past. It's not like he's completely inexperienced. Oh, and they go out and put up 44 points on the Commanders in a dominating win. Before we even talk about the Lions specifically, my question for you, Coach, is simple. As a head coach, how difficult is this to do, to strip someone of play calling duties? And then let's do the reverse. And what would it be like as a coordinator being told, I'm calling the plays now? I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah. It's a tough move. It's happened in our program where we've decided to, for one reason or another, allow somebody else to take over play calling. Oftentimes it happens when you feel like one of two things is true. Either your offense has hit a wall and it just needs some kind of a jolt. And sometimes just a new perspective is all that really takes. I mean, I don't know if Dan Campbell's going to assume play calling duties for the rest of the season. John Morton is the OC. He's been the play caller, but John Morton has never been an offensive coordinator at the professional level. This is his first year doing it. He's 50 some years old. He's been around for 20 some years. And it may be one of those things where here he is 8-9 games into the season and defenses have started to figure out a little bit what he's doing. And he's sort of hit a wall in his ability now to change it up, alter it, reduce his tendencies, et cetera. And that might be Dan Campbell saying like, hey, I'm going to give you a week to step back. I'll take it over and, I'll hand it right back to you. Or it could be a scenario where Dan Campbell really does feel like, I'm not sure about this guy. Cause that could be true as well. And Dan Campbell's saying all the right things. He's not throwing anybody under the bus. He's not indicting anyone. But it'll be very interesting to see going forward if Dan Campbell feels he can do this, because being both head coach and coordinator is hard. They're two different hats. There's two different sets of responsibilities. And I think it takes a special coach to be able to do them both well.
Let me ask you this question, because you're right. Dan Campbell has said everything correctly. He has not thrown anyone under the bus. He said it's still a group. It's a collective effort. How in the hell do you ever go back to that guy calling plays again? I just can't find a scenario where you have 44 points scored in a game, and it wasn't even close. They probably could have scored more if they wanted. They were moving the ball at will on the Commanders. How do you go back to the guy that was calling plays and say, okay, I did this for a week. Let's go here. And it's not just going to be more of the back and forth. I just feel like once you rip that Band-Aid off, it's off. And as an offensive play caller, as an offensive coordinator, you have to think, I'm going to be looking for a job after this season. Because if the head coach just stripped me of play calling, which is a large portion of my job, what the heck does this mean after this year? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I totally see what you're saying. But also, like, if you look at Detroit, I mean, they went through a stretch early in the season where in a row they scored 52, 38, 34, 37. They ripped off over 40 points per game for 4 weeks. That's a month. That's a big body of work. So John Morton was doing something right, and he was calling the plays throughout that entire stretch. But then in the previous couple of weeks, they scored 17, 24, 24. That's not terrible production. I think Dan Campbell just felt like, hey, man, we've hit a little bit of a wall, right? This guy is the same guy who for over a month, our offense was averaging 40 points per game with him calling plays. He's maybe hit a little bit of a wall. First year as a coordinator, I'm going to help him out. It could very much be the case. And now he's going to hand it right back to him. Who knows? Now, here's what's interesting. Detroit's next game is at Philly on Sunday night. Do you hand it back to him for that game? Or if you're Dan Campbell, do you say, this is a big game, and I'm not quite sure I 100% trust him just yet. That'll be really interesting to watch.
Okay, let's go. Let's play the game. If you're Dan Campbell, what do you do going into Sunday night in Philly?
I think it depends how much faith I have in that coordinator, but knowing that head coaches tend to be control oriented, I would probably trust myself before I would turn it back over to him.
Control oriented, more like control freaks.
Yeah, that was politically correct way of saying that.
Okay, let's finish up our last topic here with, I wanted to get a sleeper team in both conferences, just one team that as of right now is not in the playoff picture, but you're thinking by the season end, this team could be a team to watch for. So we're calling these our sleeper picks as of week 10 being over. I have a feeling I know where you're going with this. Let's start with the AFC, Coach. Where are you going to go?
Well, I mean, we mentioned him earlier. I mean, is it fair to call Baltimore a sleeper? They're not in the current playoff conversation big picture wise because they have a losing record, but they're only a game out in the AFC North. They're playing good football. They still have 2 dates with the Steelers on the schedule. They control their own destiny. I mean, so it's a little bit hard to call them a sleeper. I mean, if we're talking about sleeper teams, meaning teams that a lot of people aren't really looking at as being potential, not playoff qualifiers, but successful in the playoffs, that Chargers team is pretty darn good. Now they're banged up, lots of injuries, but they're going to get Omarion Hampton back eventually. They can beat you in a couple ways. They can beat you on the ground on offense. They can turn it over to Justin Herbert. And that defense is really fast. And Jesse Minter is a fast riser in coaching circles, probably going to wind up with a head coaching job at some point. They already beat the Chiefs earlier in the season and look good doing it. I mean, I never hold my breath on LA because they have a history of petering out at the end of the season, but they might be in the conversation this year.
So yeah, Baltimore, Kansas City, those 2 teams, like they're not sleepers. Like they're perennial playoff teams. I'm going to go with a team that I thought their win on Sunday is one that could actually propel them, especially when they get their quarterback back, and that's the Houston Texans. The AFC South is not fantastic, but you never know how things play out. If there's only one representative in the AFC North, you're assuming there's going to be 2 in the West and 2 in the East. I don't know if Houston's going to be able to claw their way all the way back because Indy is just so good. But I think that if CJ Stroud returns and he's healthy and they can kind of gain some momentum, they might be a tough team to deal with down the stretch. Not saying they're going to make the postseason, but they might be a tough out. And that will be interesting for the AFC, especially in that division. Let's go to the NFC now, Coach. What about the NFC in terms of sleeper picks?
Yeah, I'll take the Bears. I mean, it's another team that, again, you feel hesitant to put any kind of stock in simply because of their history. But Ben Johnson is a different coach, and Caleb Williams is playing some pretty good football. That comeback against the Giants on Sunday in the snow, I love that it was snowing at Soldier Field, is the kind of thing that a young team looking for signature wins that they can build on, like Chicago, can go a long way for them. They don't have a brutal schedule. And, they're just kind of hanging around right now in that playoff picture. And they seem to be getting better as the season goes. You want to peak late rather than early, and they seem to be trending in that direction.
I was going to go with the Bears as well, but if the Carolina Panthers would have won and not lost to the Saints, I would have said them. But just real quick, as I look at the standings, is there a team that's as good as this team that I'm about to mention that no one really talks about? The Seattle Seahawks are 7-2.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like maybe it's because they're just in the Great Northwest. No one is talking about this team. They are really good. They blew the doors off of that Cardinals team. I'm going to give you an opportunity. What do you think about the Seahawks?
Yeah, they were up 38-7 at halftime against the Cardinals. I know the Cardinals aren't great, but still, you're doing that. That's like what you see in the Big Ten when Ohio State's playing, Purdue or something.
Yeah.
It just, I think you're 100% right. People don't focus on them because they're rarely in prime time. They always play in that 405, 425 slot. They're hardly ever the national game. You probably, if I spotted you, Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith in the Jigba, most people probably couldn't name 3 Seahawks. And that's just their low profile. And But you and I as Steelers fans, we got to see them in week 2. They throttled Pittsburgh. So, I mean, I think that they're a pretty complete team.
I mean, you talk about their running backs with Walker and Charbonnet, like they have a good running game,
Yep.
and they didn't even need to use it against the Cardinals. I think I saw a statistic where in the second half they had two pass attempts. They only threw the ball once in the third and fourth quarter in those two quarters independently. So just really good stuff there from Seattle. They look like they are a team to beat. All right, let's finish it up with not a player profile, but a profile. The NFL mourned the loss of Paul Tagliabue. Paul Tagliabue was the commissioner prior to Roger Goodell, for those that don't know. So he is, has a lawyer background. I will say this, he was the commissioner of my youth, if you want to call it that. He really did turn the NFL into what it is today in terms of it champions everything else. I remember early in my life, baseball was still extremely popular. The NHL was popular. They both had lockouts. And guess what? Under Paul Tagliabue, they never once had a lockout or a stoppage in play. He was also the one that signed some massive TV deals with entities like Fox. NBC got brought back into the fold. He passed away. He is a Hall of Famer. Just want to give him some due. Coach, what are your thoughts on Paul Tagliabue?
Yeah, he was the commissioner through that period, transitioning out of the Pete Rozelle era, where the NFL blew up and became America's most popular sport. Yeah. And he expanded the league from 28 to 32 teams. He saw the NFL through the 9/11 tragedies. He helped really bring the Saints back to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. He wasn't unwilling to take a stand on social issues. He stood up to the state of Arizona when they refused to honor the Martin Luther King holiday by threatening to pull the Super Bowl out of there. I mean, he's a guy who hit a lot of right notes. If there's a note he missed, and he's not alone because just about everybody missed it, he was late to the party, so to speak, on concussions and CTE and those types of things. He was not alone in that regard, but I think overwhelmingly his tenure as commissioner was great for the game of football.
Yeah, and he handed the baton off to Roger Goodell, and Roger Goodell is run literally to the bank. So
yes.
There you go. Yes. All right, Coach, what's coming up on the call sheet this week?
Yeah, Whiteboard Wednesday. Coach Lasasso's back. My guests will both be back this week. Coach Lasasso and Pez on Friday. We're in our normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine. Our Monday morning game ball show was yesterday. And then up on my X, KT Smith, FFSN, tons of video. Went through the whole Steelers offense on Monday, Steelers defense on Tuesday, breaking down the Philadelphia Green Bay game today as well. So lots of good stuff up on X there.
He's doing the Lord's work, folks. You got to check it out. Make sure you check him out on X. Gosh, you get yourself some brownie points for the Steelers film. But you can check us out at steelcurtainnetwork.com or Steel Curtain Network, wherever you get your podcast. Coach, been a great show. Thanks for your time. We'll talk next week. Take it easy.